I'm Mark, 29. I have a 10-year-old son with my ex, Ellie, 27, and we broke up because of her infidelity. I never planned for my life to turn into constant arguments and calls with my ex, but it all started about 10 years ago. Back then, we were together, and she got pregnant. There was uncertainty about whether I was the father. We both knew that. After the baby was born, I immediately did a DNA test. It turned out the child was mine. From that moment on, I took full responsibility. I stayed involved in his life, provided financial support, time, and upbringing. We split up, but as a father, I never disappeared. We agreed on shared custody. 1 week with me, 1 week with her. For a long time it worked, even if things were tense. But then her life started to spiral in a chaotic direction. At first she said she had met someone new, then someone else. Then those men would disappear just as quickly as they appeared. And every new relationship ended the same way. Pregnancy. One child, then another, and so on. Now she's pregnant with her 5th child since our breakup. All of them have different fathers, and none of those men are involved in their lives. I tried not to interfere. That wasn't my life, or so I told myself. But then the calls started. Can you take all the kids to the park so they can have fun with your son? Can you buy gifts so no one feels left out? Can you help with clothes and school supplies? It's not a big deal for you since you're already supporting one child anyway. At first, it sounded like requests. Then it became expectation. And now it feels like demands, as if I've already agreed to be part of every one of her children's lives. I started refusing, calmly, without conflict. But every refusal turned into another wave of pressure. She began calling me selfish, saying I'm dividing the children, and that my son is seeing unfairness and suffering because of me. The worst part is that it reached my son too. He started coming back from her house repeating things that clearly weren't his words, that I don't help, that things are hard at her place because of me. Later, even a therapist confirmed there was emotional pressure on the child, but the court still refused to change custody arrangements. So I ended up in a situation where I'm responsible for my own son, but I'm being pushed to take responsibility for 4 other children who are not mine, and any refusal is treated like a moral failure. I don't hate her. I don't wish her harm, but I understand one thing very clearly. If I agree to help everyone, it will never stop. It won't be occasional help. It will become a permanent role I can't walk away from. And the hardest question I'm left with is this. Am I really supposed to sacrifice my own life to fix the consequences of her endless decisions? Or is what I'm already doing for my son enough? Well, I think he is not obligated to support his ex-wife's children. Since they are not his, he can calmly focus only on the custody of his own son, and his ex should deal with her own problems herself. What do you think about this? And let's read the comments from other people. OP. I don't know what you've tried, but you need an attorney, a good one, who specializes in this sort of thing, and your case should be entirely about the welfare of your son and his mother's lack of ability to provide emotionally stable living arrangements. Is just communicating with her via app an option? Feels like that would make it easier to just keep reiterating that you won't respond to anything that doesn't directly involve your son. If not, well, still feels like all you can do is be a broken record. You know my answer on this. It's not changing. It hasn't changed in a decade. It will not change. My only responsibility is to my son. Stop asking for more. Good luck. Go to outings only when your son is with you, and the gifts you buy him stays at you. Celebrate his birthday the week he is with you. Those are things I already do. But she wants her other kids to be included on my time anyway. Update 1. A few weeks passed after I finally stopped giving in to her constant requests. Honestly, I thought that after hearing no a few times, she'd eventually accept my decision and stop calling me. Instead, things only got worse. One evening, her mother called me out of nowhere. We had barely spoken directly over the years, so the call itself felt strange. "Mark, I'm not trying to start a fight," she said, "but you're a good man. Would it really be so hard for you to help all the kids once in a while? None of this is their fault." I sat there in silence for a few seconds because I genuinely didn't know where to begin. "I already help my child," I replied, "every single day. But the other children aren't my responsibility." She let out a heavy sigh. "But they're growing up alongside your son. To them, you're practically a father already." That was the moment I realized Ellie had been telling her version of the story to everyone around her. And apparently, she told it so many times that people had started believing it. A few days later, I went to pick up my son like I always did. I rang the doorbell, and the door opened almost immediately, but it wasn't my son who came running first. It was all 4 of her younger kids. "Daddy Mark is here!" the oldest one shouted excitedly. I froze. At first, I honestly thought I'd misheard him. Then 2 of the others started saying the exact same thing, while the youngest grabbed my hand like this was completely normal. I looked up at Ellie. She was standing in the hallway, leaning against the wall with a smile on her face. Not embarrassed, not surprised. If anything, she looked like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Ellie, what was that?" She just shrugged. "They started calling you that on their own. I can't exactly stop them." I didn't believe that for a second. Kids don't randomly start calling a man dad, especially one they only see whenever he comes to pick up his own child. "Are you seriously telling me you let them believe I'm their father?" She didn't even look uncomfortable. "Well, not their biological father. But does that really matter? Family is about who's there for you." It took me a few seconds to process what I just heard. It matters a lot. I'm there for my son. That doesn't automatically make me the father of every child living in this house. Her smile disappeared instantly. "See? That's exactly why children grow up emotionally damaged." I had no interest in arguing anymore. I called my son, we got into the car, and we drove away. For most of the ride, he stayed quiet, staring out the window. Then, in a small voice, he asked, "Dad, why don't you want to be their dad too?" My stomach dropped. Those weren't his words. I gently asked him where he'd heard that. He looked down at his lap. "Mom says a real man doesn't separate children into his and someone else's." That was the moment I realized this had become much bigger than money or favors. She wasn't just asking me for help anymore. She was slowly convincing our own son that I was somehow obligated to become a father to every one of her children, simply because we used to be together. Then, the very next evening, she sent me a text that erased any remaining doubt I had about what she was trying to do. "I've been thinking, maybe you should just become the legal guardian of all of them. You're the only decent man they've ever had in their lives. It would be the right thing to do for our family." The words "our family" made me read the message twice. It honestly felt like, in her mind, we'd never even broken up. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of whatever she had planned next. Update 2. After that message, I realized things were only going to get worse. She wasn't asking for help anymore. She was slowly creating a story where I had supposedly agreed to become a father to all of her children. That was the moment I stopped responding to her messages and contacted a family lawyer. He went through all of our conversations and immediately said, "If she's convincing the children that you're their father, and then using that to pressure you into providing money or support, this is no longer just a dispute between exes." We decided not to wait any longer. But just a week later, Ellie did something that even my lawyer didn't expect. I received court papers. She had actually filed a lawsuit. In her petition, she claimed that I had acted as a father figure to all of her children for years and had suddenly abandoned the family. As I read through it, it honestly felt like she was describing someone else's life. She had even attached photos of me standing near her younger children. The problem was that every single one of those photos had been taken on the exact same day, my son's 10th birthday party. In most of them, I wasn't even looking at the other kids. My lawyer just smiled. She just made our case much easier. During the hearing, her attorney argued that the children had been calling me dad for years. The judge asked one simple question: is there a single legal document showing that Mr. Mark has ever been appointed the legal guardian of any of these children? There wasn't. Then the court reviewed our messages. They clearly showed things like, "Just become the legal guardian of all of them. You should be a father to all of them. A real man would do it." That was the moment Ellie realized things weren't going the way she expected. The judge looked directly at her and asked, "If he isn't the father of these children, on what legal basis have you been demanding that he fulfill a father's responsibilities for all these years?" She immediately started contradicting herself. First, she claimed she didn't really mean it. Then she said the children had come up with it on their own. A few minutes later, she insisted it had actually been his idea. Her story kept changing every few minutes. In the end, the court completely dismissed her lawsuit, but that wasn't my biggest victory. My lawyer immediately filed a counterclaim. We asked the court to modify the custody arrangement because of her repeated emotional manipulation of our son, her attempts to turn him against me, and her constant involvement of him in conflicts between adults. This time, the court ordered an independent psychological evaluation. The results were devastating for Ellie. The psychologist concluded that she had repeatedly made our son feel responsible for problems that were never his, and had convinced him that I was somehow obligated to provide for all of her children. 2 months later, the court changed our custody arrangement. My son came to live with me full-time. Ellie was granted visitation, but only under a clearly defined schedule. As we walked out of the courthouse, she shouted that I had destroyed her family. I didn't say a word. After that, she started seeing our son less and less. It seemed like she was spending more time looking for another relationship than trying to rebuild one with her own child. Now my son and I live together. At first, things weren't easy for him. He carried a lot of guilt over things that were never his responsibility. So we started seeing a therapist regularly. I'm hopeful that, with time, it'll help him heal and grow up without carrying all that emotional baggage. I don't regret standing up for myself. None of this happened because of me. Still, every now and then, I catch myself wondering if there was anything I could have done differently. Well, that's my opinion on this situation. I think he absolutely made the right decision by refusing to take responsibility for children who weren't his. He also did the right thing by going to court to make sure his son could spend more time living with him, especially since his mother was putting emotional pressure on him and manipulating him. Hopefully, his son will now have a chance to heal, feel emotionally safe, and stop carrying guilt for things that were never his responsibility. As for his ex, I think it's time for her to focus on providing for her own children and raising them properly, instead of constantly looking for another relationship. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.